People look at this work, and the first question is like, is everything posed and staged and set up? And why do they say that? Because everything looks too good, right? Generally, when it looks too good to be true, they just automatically assume, oh, it must be posed. This is all set up. I can't set up anything on the wedding day. You know what I mean? I don't set up ceremony and speeches and first looks and first dances and all that stuff. The only thing I can do is to try to control. And the things that I can't control are what I'm telling you. Bride preparations, not controlling what's happening because I'm not a makeup artist, so I'm not going to tell her how to apply the makeup or anything like that. I'm just controlling where that situation that's going to happen anyways, where it actually happens. That's what I do. I just control where it's going to happen. That's it. Because everything that happens is unplanned. I can't even direct that because I don't even know what they're doing or what's going to happen. You know, if they're going to exchange gifts, I don't even know who's going to bring the gift over. I just know that they're exchanging gifts. If the bride's going to write a note to the groom, I can just film it. I can't say like, okay, write this, and this is gonna look good if you write this. You know, I already have the word scripted in my. Whatever happens, and I can't pose that. I can't direct that. I can only control the environment where it's going to happen. If that's what's considered posed, then yes, you know, we pose. But it's not pose. It's control. Just remember that. It's just controlling. It's controlling the area that stuff's going to happen. We'll talk about this. Be efficient as possible. Always remember this. We need a lot of content for these films. A lot of content. You have to think fast sometimes, and you have to visualize when you're shooting, because how many of us are doing, how many of us get in the habit in the edit to do little mini sequences where we kind of piece together shots to make it look like there was more than one camera in the room when there really wasn't. We all do it. So you have to kind of visualize sometimes, and you're almost piecing together this puzzle in your mind, like, okay, I have this medium shot, I have to piece it together with this, maybe like a wider shot or a tighter shot or a macro shot, just to create that little mini sequence that I'm trying to produce for the film. So sometimes you just have to visualize. Now, when we talk about control, I want to get into, later on today, we're going to talk about first looks. First looks are very important to us. Why? Number one, again, we can control where it happens. We're not going to control the first look. Like, we're not going to tell the bride and groom how to react when they see each other, because that would just be fake. We can just control where it's going to happen. And remember, you want something where there's even light, always. You know, so when we talk about lighting, always don't just look for light, because most of the light that we're dealt on a wedding day is what type of light? Hard light. It's harsh light. You know, it's 12 o'clock light, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Magic hour happens when? It's the last hour of the day, right? That beautiful lighting, either in the morning, which I don't even want to get up that early, but hopefully it's like a sunset situation where it's like literally the last hour of light during the day. So most of the day, you're dealt nasty, harsh light, hard light that casts hard shadows and things like that. You know, so it's not that flattering really to the couple or the image itself. So you're always looking for nice soft light, and sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can do that, you know, if it's an overcast day. You have a nice bed of soft lighting and things like that. But sometimes, if you're in Cabo, Mexico, there's no clouds. You know, there's just that orange pill in the sky killing you. So here's a sample of a first look situation. And a first look I could film by myself. And we'll get into camera positions and all that for first looks later on. But I want to show you this so you can see that nothing is even, it's not posed, it's not set up, it's not directed. It's just, you're really controlling the environment that these things are going to happen. And later on, we'll also take a look at some actual first looks from different camera positions so you can get a good idea of what the lighting should be like in all angles. Because the lighting, if you're shooting a first look from like 2-3 different angles, all 2 or 3 different angles should have nice even lighting, you know, or some good lighting that you can work with. So this is one camera angle from the front, and a bride here had a long walk. She had a long walk, and this is all just raw footage. So I have her there. I know I have a shot from there. And then here, I'm going to move, and this is just all raw footage. There's a lot of moving around, because I know she's coming around the corner now. So now I'm going to create another shot. Instead of just keeping this one shot on the groom the entire 2 minutes that it took her to walk up, you want to compose. There she comes around the corner. I pan up, and now I have another shot. And then I'm going to rack focus here, and then I have another shot. And then I can rack focus back to her. Then I have another shot. So this whole time, I'm just creating content. And right there, I probably have another shot. You know, so and now I'm moving. Don't just stay there. Don't get tunnel vision. We're like, oh my God, I can only stay in this one position. Move around, because you're trying to create all these different shots. And all the while, I have a side camera that's static that has the entire sequence tied together, you know. This is just an active camera. I'll have a static camera that's just kind of capturing everything as it unfolds. But I'm able to cut back to this active camera when I can in post. So now we'll look at it in a second here. We'll look at it cleaned up. And one last shot. So this is all raw, and now we cleaned up the shots. And now you can almost count how many different shots we have. We have one there at least. We have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, even 9, 10. And we're not going to use all these shots in post, but we have it in our arsenal. And I can cut all these shots together with my wide shot that was just static the whole time. And that's it. So we end up with, and this is not even including the audio that they spoke. This was just the shots, okay? But I have all these shots. This is just visual eye candy. So when I talk about highlights, you know, producing highlights or trailers or films, I could use half these shots in the trailer and half the shots in the main feature, and they look entirely different. Like it's the same event, but they look entirely different. Any questions?
That was awesome.
Cool?
That was fantastic.
All right.
Yeah, really great. So I want to take it to our in-studio audience. If you guys have any questions, now's a good time. Perfect, and they do. Great.
I have one. I suspect everyone's asking the same thing. How did you deal with the dress that fell? The one that you hung? Because I mean, I'm too scared to even move the bride's dress. I'll always get a bridesmaid or someone to do it. So how did you
didn't see me moving the bride's dress. Yeah.
I'm assuming that you were part of that.
Yeah. You just rehang it. I mean, here's the reality. The bride's dress is going to get dirty on the day. Obviously, you don't want to destroy the bride's dress. That was kind of unexpected. It was kind of like a joke clip that I put in there. Trust me, we didn't mean to kind of drop a dress. But things will happen, you know. Yeah.
Would you explain? If you had to, would you say something to the bride, or would you just carry on? I mean,
that the dress dropped?
The dress is fine.
No way. No, because there was no dirt on the dress, and generally, like we'll pick a spot. Whereas if it did fall, it wasn't like mud or water or anything like that, you know. So definitely common sense applies. Like when you're dealing with a bride's shoes, you know, like if she has a $20,000 pair of shoes and you're in a high rise, maybe you don't want to be hanging it off the balcony for a shot, you know, things like that. Or her rings, you know, doing a ring shot like right on the edge of a balcony. Yeah, but there's been, trust me, I've heard horror stories where brides' rings have been lost, you know, doing creative shots and things like that, and dresses have been set on fire, and you know, they were too close to a candle, and you know, kind of caught on fire. Not at one of my weddings, but you know, there are horror stories out there, you know. So, yeah.
I really like the point you made about editing makes you a better shooter, because I've noticed I'm still doing just stills, but I know the moment I shifted to really wanting to focus on album layouts, doing that similarly helped me. My big question, you were saying earlier, you don't do the eyepieces obviously to miss the periphery, but in a lot of these, even the prep, there's a moving camera plus a moving subject, and you still get that tack sharp focus. I'm kind of impressed by that. I don't know how how I would begin to achieve that? Is it just practice, or do you have
It's just practice, and sometimes, here's the only thing that you're looking for, is what we talked about before, was a 3 to 5 second rule. In the edit, honestly, I just need 2 to 3 seconds. So if it's 2 to 3 seconds that are in focus, sometimes you get lucky and you nail it, and sometimes maybe you just end up with a second or two, but you're just looking for that 2 to 3 seconds maybe that are just like tack sharp and focus. And a lot of it sometimes is just, it's practicing the movement. Like you saw that string of bridal prep shots, I cut out so much. Like if I got left with 100 shots, maybe like 40 shots were no good.
So even in the bridal prep, you don't use like a lens hood or any of that kind of equipment?
It's just literally, it's a camera and a monopod. I don't use any additional gear. The only additional gear that I would use is the camera microphone if I want to start recording some natural audio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your first look, are you always only shooting that by yourself?
No, I'll generally, if I have somebody else with me, and generally Jessica's with me, and what she started doing recently was, and we'll take a look at a first look that we did together recently, we'll leave the side camera kind of static. I'll be the main angle, and she'll be with a monopod off to one side, maybe just looking for an interesting shot, maybe shooting through some foreground or some shrubbery or some greens, things like that. Just things to kind of add content and add interest to the shots. But generally, I could I've shot a first look by myself with no problem, because you have a static camera, which is going to cover you the whole time. It's not going to move. Let me tell you something. Static cameras are better than second shooters. Number one, yeah, I'm serious. Number one, they're free. Number two, they never move. And for a wedding day, if you think about it, most times that you have a camera set up, your bride and groom's not moving, and the camera's not moving. So why do you even, once you're in focus and you've set your composition, why do you even need an operator there? Having an operator there only puts you in a situation where now they might fiddle with the camera. They might fiddle with your solid shot. So in the main shot, when I was kind of like transitioning from shot to shot, if I had a second shooter there and he fiddled the camera when I needed him to be solid, then I kind of like, so I tell you, sometimes, and we'll talk about this when we get into live shooting, the ceremony and reception, sometimes it's better just to have nobody than to have somebody. Static camera is better than most second shooters, I tell you. And most people at home and here will agree that at some point you've dealt with some footage where you just kind of wished there was no operator behind the camera. You just wished it was just left alone and remained static. Yeah.
I had a quick question about when you were talking about preps and you were doing some of the close-ups of the brides and the stylists. How do you deal with talking heads where the bride or the stylist just will not stop talking? And, sometimes you don't want the lips moving because you're not going to use the audio. And I've kind of struggled with that.
I get it all the time. And sometimes I have to redo shots so many times because I'm just waiting for the moment where, because I can't tell them, hey, can you be quiet? Can you not have a conversation with a bride? Sometimes you get makeup artists that just talk entirely too much, So, but I've never encountered a situation where I've told them to like be quiet. I even have one in South Florida. She is a chatterbox. And I still find the room to at least get a couple seconds where she has to breathe, like inhale, because she can go, it's like nonstop. So I get what you're saying. I don't like the chatterbox either, especially when I'm doing candid shots of the couple, or maybe like some visual eye candy shot of the bride. I would just tell her, I said, I don't need you talking, really just kind of be happy, be happy, smile with your eyes, things like that. But I don't really, I'm not going to use the parts where you're talking because the viewer of your film is not going to be able to see what you're saying. So it's always best just to kind of, just be happy, enjoy each other, interact, and things like that. But try not to talk too much. Especially like if they're walking down a pathway and walking back, things like that, where you're just trying to get the candid emotions. And sometimes you want to have a conversation like, oh my God, this and that, and Dave's here, and we were out drinking, and this, all these things that you're not going to see in the film, or you're not going to be able to hear in the film, but you're going to be able to see these mouths moving. It really is, I think, disruptive to the flow of the film. So I'll always tell them in that situation. But during preps, I just I let it flow. I let it flow, and hopefully by like my 10th wasted shot, I get a shot of them, you know, not talking. Yeah, yeah. So now we're going to talk about, we touched on briefly, was types of lighting that we're going to be dealt. The most common light that we're going to be dealt with is hard light. Okay, hard light is a bad light. It produces sharp edge shadows, things that are really unflattering to a bride. So we still have to deal with it because it's going to happen. Sometimes we're going to have even ceremonies that happen earlier in the day where you're going to have to deal with this hard light situations. So when it comes to planning for a ceremony, which we're going to get into later tomorrow, part of your shot planning process should always be light and how to kind of shoot in the best lighting environment. And like I said before, you're always looking for areas where the lighting's even, at least. I'm going to skip through here. This is an example of what happens with hard light. It creates these hard shadows, but it's still situations that you have to be able to shoot in. You can use those shadows to create dramatic effects in your imagery with video. That's a great thing about video as opposed to still photography, is that you're dealing with motion stills. So you can do a lot of things that are create these dramatic effects and kind of add to your visual eye candy, if you will, you know, because we're always looking for content. So even though we're kind of dealt these harsh shadows, you can use them to your advantage, really. Then you have soft light, which is very low in contrast, hardly any shadows. A softer light is always a better light, and you get imagery like this. Very even toned, no shadows, everything just looking nice and even and very beautiful. I could shoot in soft light all day long, and if it's lacking contrast, you can always add contrast in post, and, you know, give it some pop, give it some sizzle. But this is primarily what you're looking for, is nice soft light everywhere you shoot. Even if you're in a situation where there's hard light, look for an area where there's soft, even light. Maybe it's shaded by a tree, maybe some buildings, but you have to make sure that all your angles are kind of nice and even and not blown out. These cameras, they shoot very compressed video. So it's not like shooting photography or shooting video, say like on a RED camera, where you're shooting in RAW and you have a lot of latitude in terms of your dynamic range. With these cameras, pretty much what you shoot is what you get. So if you blow out your highlights with these cameras, they're pretty much gone. If you crush your blacks too much, that detail is probably gone forever. So just be very careful, and that's why I adjust the in-camera settings on my camera, just to give me at least a little bit of latitude in terms of my contrast and sharpness. But this is the light that you're looking for. This is the light that you should always go for in terms of your candid shooting, your first looks. You should always be looking for lighting like this. There's a lot of time, like I tell you, most times that we're dealing with a couple, we're dealing with a harsh light outside, so it gets very challenging, especially if you want to introduce like a couple different angles, because one angle may look great, but maybe your other angle, it has a blown out background, you know, and that blown out background on video just does not look the same. You know, with photography, you can take it into Lightroom and you can kind of tone down certain things where we can't. You don't have that same latitude. So when's the best time to film? Anybody know? Magic hour.
The golden hours.
Exactly. The first and last hour, correct? And then you get beautiful imagery that looks like this. That's just gorgeous. And you can just really begin to create shots, you know, the colors in the sky change, and it really adds all these dramatic elements to the shots that you'd love to shoot in this all day long, this magic hour lighting. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We're not dealt those situations. So in terms of bride preps, because we're going to get into bride preps right now, and we have this amazing bride prep set for this next segment, and we actually have a bride, we have a makeup artist, we have a beautiful bride, and we have a makeup artist. So we're going to bring them in, but before we bring them in, I'd like to talk about setting the stage. And when we talked a little bit about educating the bride about lighting and letting her know exactly what we need, which is what we talked about. We already have the camera. We just needed a bride, the high chair, and some natural light. And this is what we've been kind of dealt here. And this, honestly, this is what I'm dealt about 90% of the time at a wedding. Only because I've talked to them, I've kind of educated them, I've told them exactly what I need to make the bride look as beautiful as she wants to appear in the film. And this is a situation that I have. Now, very important for me is to show up before the bride sits to do her makeup. Why?
So that you can move the chair into the position you want it to be.
Bingo. This is so important, is the position of the chair, because sometimes, even though you have you got a great light coming in, you have a great room, you got a great bride, you have a high chair and all this stuff, if she's doing her makeup faced in, and sometimes that happens. How many of you had showed up to a bride prep where there's beautiful light, but she's faced into the room, into the underexposed part of the room? It's not a good shooting situation, but now she's comfortable, now she's half done her makeup, and moving her is kind of, the makeup artist already relaxed and comfortable with this shooting situation. So try to show up before the bride even sits down. Like even today, I talked to the makeup artist, and we kind of talked, like, where are we going to put the chair? What's good for you? And I told her what's good for me. She told me what's good for her, and we kind of compromised. We came to a happy medium, and that's what you want to do, because you still want to be able to let the makeup artist perform their job function properly, right? And you want them to be comfortable and relaxed and not upset and things like that, because you're dealing with the bride's face, so you don't want the makeup artist to be stressed out, and you definitely don't want the bride to be stressed out. So just show up. The positioning of the chair is going to be very important, because when you come in, obviously you want her facing the light, but you don't want her facing the light direct, because then it just creates just a real flat image. And with this video and with this visual eye candy that we're trying to produce, it's okay to have some dramatic lighting. That's kind of like what we're looking at. And we also want to be able to shoot from anywhere in the room. So keep that in mind. If I just have a bride facing a wall, I'm not going to be able to shoot from over here, because I'm just going to get her back. But if I angle it a little bit, I at least have some side profile. If you want to do some silhouette shooting, or if you want to put some stuff in your foreground, or maybe use some reflective surfaces. This room that's set up here is perfect, because as soon as you walk in, what do you see right away besides the makeup chair? You see the vanity, you see some reflective surfaces, you see all these things that you can begin to start creating some interesting looking shots, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking to create some interesting looking shots. So when you walk into a room, most of us will walk into a room, within a minute, you already know, okay, I'm going to be shooting from over here, I'm going to get this shot, and you're already inspired by just the elements that are in the room that you can now use in your favor to start creating some of these really interesting looking shots. So that's going to play a factor for the chair, correct? Because if the mirrors are over there, and maybe you want to shoot off the mirrors or something like that, or you want to use some foreground, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to have the chair facing this way. So the positioning of the chair, as little as it may seem, it's such an important deal, is this positioning of the chair. And obviously at the end, you definitely want to make sure that it's okay with the makeup artist and she's good with it. And generally, it's definitely, the bride's definitely going to be exposed enough to where it's going to be a good situation for her to get an accurate representation of what the bride's face is going to look like outside. So we've come in, we've kind of scanned the room, and I've found that this position is probably going to be the best, and then I'm good. I kind of leave it at that, and the makeup artist will come in with our beautiful bride, and they will start their routine. All right. Now, you have to use, you've got to use common sense when it comes to filming the bride, because there's going to be a certain stage, like this is the beginning stage of makeup, and this is really, it's not really the stage that the bride wants to see herself in the film. She kind of wants the finishing stuff. And this is why I use this time to be creative and not so intimate with the bride. Creative meaning I'm shooting from a distance. I'm shooting more wide, more foreground, more silhouette, stuff that really doesn't reveal her face so close up yet. Later on, once she starts, final details and things like that on her face, some brides you can just start shooting from the beginning and you're okay. And then for the most part, but even those brides, they want you to wait until the end, until it's kind of the final touches and things like that. We have a bride today, very beautiful. I could start shooting her up close and personal from the beginning and I would be okay, all the way until then. But like I said, even a bride like this, she still wants you to kind of get the final look of what she's going to look like and things like that. Let me get my camera, and I think somebody's going to bring it on set. We'll go through some of the shots. Oh, I can get it. Okay, cool.
And 2 questions. How often do you change your lenses during the bridal prep?
Yep.
And what lenses are you using?
I use two lenses mainly. I use the Canon 50 1.2, and I also use a gorgeous lens. It's a Carl Zeiss 100 Macro 2.0.
Oh.
It's a very sharp lens, and the imagery off this lens it's gorgeous. It's not cheap. The lens is about $1,800, but it's a great lens, and you can use it during other parts of the day as well, because it is a 2.0 lens. So you can use it for the ceremony. You can use it for some reception stuff. It's a very versatile lens, and it's built like a tank. Because I've had this lens for years. Before the DSLRs even came out, I was using the 35mm lens adapters, and this was one of my first lenses. And I've dropped this lens. I mean, I've mistreated this lens, and it still works perfectly after all this time. So this is a great lens. But this combination here, I use 90% of the time during preps. This is all I use. Is just these 2 lenses, the camera, and a monopod. So I don't have a shoulder rig, I don't have eyepieces, I don't have none of that stuff. I just literally have these 2 lenses, and if I want to go wide or something like that, I've got the new version 2 Canon 24-70, it's a gorgeous lens. I really love the lens. And that's it. Any other questions? Any questions here?
I think
You
we're
guys
good.
Okay. And like I said, we'll shoot a little bit, and I think they're tethered to the camera, right? Yeah. So when you first start shooting, you're going to be in a new environment here with different type of light. Am I going to be able to see? I don't think. So while they tether the camera, I'll talk about some other things. So what's going to happen here is very important. You're going to be in a new environment from, say, like your last shoot when you were shooting a wedding reception. Now you're like bright and early, plenty of light coming through, so you're probably going to be blown out. So,
As a question, just in general, this is from CY Horse, and just wondering about when you're actually recording and you're trying to get the audio, just the live interaction that you're having with people, like the communication, how much communication is done before you start shooting, I guess, with the people that are in the room and with the makeup artist, and how much conversation have you had?
not too much conversation. I definitely want to know what's going on, so I'll kind of, the conversations that I'll generally have with the bride, I will ask the bride mainly if she's going to be doing traditional vows or personal vows. Because if you're going to do personal vows, that means there's a chance that she may be writing out the vows, and I want that opportunity to be able to capture that. So I'll ask her, I said, are you doing personal or traditional vows? And she said, oh, I'm doing personal vows. I said, great, have you written your vows yet? I wrote them, but they're on the computer, I still have to transfer them to the paper. And I said, great, I want to be able to capture you writing your vows or making that transfer from the computer to paper that she's going to use for the actual ceremony. That type of thing, you know. So I just want, my conversations with the bride is more kind of like feeling this new environment out, seeing what's going to be going on, if there's going to be any gift giving, if there's going to be vows that are going to be written. I'll find the maid of honor and I'll ask if there's a speech that's potentially going to be written. Because all this stuff that you record during preps, say like somebody writing their vows or writing a speech, you can actually tie that stuff into the actual audio of it live, you know, in the film. So, and that stuff's very compelling to watch when you actually see like the preparation of this personal vows that are now being read at the ceremony. So that's why it's always good to be on your toes, ask a lot of questions, because if you don't ask what's going on and somebody's transferring some very personal vows in the next room and you're oblivious to it because you never asked, you just missed what? You just missed all this content. Yeah, we're always looking for content. We cannot afford to not have that content. So just ask questions. Is there a speech? Is there gifts? Is there any letter writing, personal vows, traditional vows? If they say it's traditional vows, then it is what it is. But at least you asked, because if it was personal vows, I definitely want the opportunity to be able to record that. And that's it. So we're in a new environment. Now remember, I don't know how accurate that is. And here I'm working with my Kelvin on my camera, which is basically going to let me dial in the color temperature to my taste. However, my eyes kind of seeing this, but hopefully I'm going to be in the right range. 5600 to my eyes is still a little bit cool, even though it's balanced for daylight. But I'm going to warm it up just a little bit because I like the warmer tones. Warmer tones is happier. Colder is kind of, maybe not so happy. So I'm definitely a fan of the warmer tones. Make sure you adjust your, now here, the native ISO on this particular camera, because I'm using the Canon 1DC, the native ISO is 400, which gives me the most latitude in post as far as dynamic range and things like that. But all cameras are different. So my advice to you would be, learn your camera. Learn, what the native ISOs are, and try to stick to those as best you can. Now, how do we compensate for exposure now? Because I'm gonna have a lot of light coming through the windows here. If I'm not compensating with my ISO and my aperture, I'm almost forced to shoot at a higher shutter, unless I kind of manipulate the aperture and things like that. So those are gonna be the two things. So some people don't like to shoot at a high shutter, but sometimes you don't have a choice on these cameras because they don't have built-in ND filters. And unless you're going to start screwing on ND filters for every shot, which I don't recommend, this job is very run and gun. So I just don't feel like we have the time to be switching out filters and things like that. I think it's just a matter of making quick adjustments, either with your shutter, your aperture, or your ISO. Hopefully it's just a shutter. Now in a room like this, I will generally, if this area were a little bit darker, I would shoot probably at a higher ISO, just so I'd be able to compensate, just in case I'd have to film something further into the room and not so close to the window, such as maybe a bride's dad walking in or somebody walking in with a gift. I'd want to be able to transition to that person without having to go into the ISO menu, because if I have to start adjusting ISO and shutter and aperture and all these things together, I'm going to miss the shot. So I just want to be able to compensate very quickly with my shutter. But if the primary focus is the bride, I'll probably keep it at its native ISO, and I'll just make adjustments to the shutter.
And we can just assume you're always at 2.8 for the most part?
Well, I'm on a 50 lens now, and this lens, I'm generally at about 2.0, 2.5, 2.8, in that range. I'm not, like I said before, I'm not at 1.2 or 1.8 because I don't want like an eyeball in focus and the nose out of focus. Just be natural. And I try to get the bride as relaxed as possible, because sometimes, like I said before, they're not models and they're not trained actresses or anything like that. And sometimes they just don't know what you want them to do on camera. So I just let them know that it's okay just to be themselves. And I had a conversation with her earlier where I just said, I just want you to be relaxed, be normal, and whatever happens, happens. I don't need you to do anything special for the camera, because I don't want anything contrived or anything that looks fake. So she's looking good. I'll probably jump in here and I'll grab a couple quick shots. And I'm checking focus before each shot. And I have a good movement there. Now these shots, remember, Once you have your shot, and I can introduce some movement here, so now I just created a second shot. So once I have like a static shot, I can come back here, and then I can introduce some movement just to add interest to the shot. Okay, and then I'm basically just going to move around, and I'm going to look for little 3 to 5 second shots of the bride, and I'm going to look for some things like this that have some foreground.
Hey, Ray, I got a quick question.
Yeah.
You were checking focus there. Did I notice you zoomed in really far to check your focus and then zoomed back out to make your shot?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Exactly. So I definitely, especially when you're that close, you definitely want to make sure that her eyes are tack sharp and focused, you know. These cameras work great and they look great as long as the subject's in focus. And here I've just completed like a 2-shot sequence. Very easily. Now I can even switch lenses. If you can keep going with the eye shadow just a little bit, I'll get a couple more shots. A lot of times when we're shooting, we're anticipating shots. And sometimes we're wasting so much time because the shot's not happening, but we're kind of like staying in one position. If it gets to the point where you're just waiting for too long for that one shot that you need to complete your sequence, just ask the makeup artist, you know, say, you know, can you dab your brush, or whatever you're looking for, just ask it for it, because all that time that you're wasting, you're missing other live shots that you can actually get. So don't get too caught up in waiting for that one shot. And here I'll change lenses. And in a typical bride preps, you're in the room for about an hour and a half, which is a long time. And this process right here, it's like 30 or 40 minutes of really creative, interesting shots that you should be able to achieve in that amount of time. So here I'm just kind of looking for anything that might look interesting. And just any, you know, there. And you can always introduce movement. You can really start building up the content if you have like a static shot and you hold it for 3 to 5 seconds, and then you introduce a shot with movement, you just created a second shot. And here I'm going to wait till the makeup artist comes back up. And you can almost time it. I can come from here to the point where the makeup artist starts applying the makeup. Here and right there. And that's it. And really just anything that looks interesting. Here the window that we have here is up high, so you don't really have a situation where you can shoot silhouettes, unfortunately, with the bride. But if it was like a regular glass window or door, I could probably get some silhouettes. And when you have a bride like this, you know, beautiful green eyes, blue eyes, you can really exploit that, because it's just really going to look good. And even when you're this close, always check focus. And these are great looking shots. And you're just looking for as many as you can get. But you don't want to overkill. Just as soon as I've got a handful of shots, because these aren't even the final stage shots. Just watch your exposure. And sometimes you just wait because you're anticipating the shot. And there you go. And then you can move while she's still applying. Try to move quick and reestablish another shot. Because that just became part of the first shot you were taking. Very fast, you just move. So like I tell you, 3 to 5 seconds, and move. Don't get stuck there, because if I would have been stuck there for 20 seconds, I end up losing all these other shots. Now at some point, don't forget the makeup artist, because as a viewer, you want to kind of know the whole story. So you want to know, oh my God, who's applying makeup to her? So I'll show a shot of the makeup artist, just so the viewer knows. Makeup artist is like, no. just so the viewer knows where the hands are coming from, things like that. And you can get interesting with these. You know, you don't have to show her whole face. I can just kind of play around with a little bit of foreground. And you can even do transitions. And like I said, you can even introduce movement. Well, when she comes on the other side. You can do rack focuses. You know, you can go from the bride where she's actually, could you apply that? Yeah.
Ray, how many of your shots have a transition? Like, do you recommend that for every shot?
What's that?
As far as transitions, can you talk a little bit more as to how, like, is there a percentage of shots that you recommend having a transition? Is it all shots that have a transition, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Not all the shots. What I try to do is get a static shot, so that counts as one shot, and then I'll do a movement shot. Without moving my placement, I could get like 2 or 3 different shots without ever moving or changing lenses or anything. So if I have one shot, I'll do that same shot, introducing movement now. And now I have basically the same shot, but shot differently, so it looks differently in the film. So I could introduce maybe that shot like in highlights, and then the other shot, which was essentially the same thing in a film. And you'd think you were looking at 2 entirely different things, but you weren't. It was basically the same shot, just executed differently.
Cool.
And remember, when you have the bride here, there's going to be so many other things going on. Like right now, we're in a training environment, and it's just me, the bride, and the makeup artist. But generally speaking, you're going to have so many other characters here. You're going to have, you know, bridesmaids, maids of honors, the parents, little nieces. You know, so there's a lot of things going on, and you really need to. Beyond this, like right now, I would probably stop this portion and start looking for the dress, the shoes, earrings, the rings, and I would start shooting details. Because right now I've got a handful of shots that'll cover me, and it's not all the makeup shots that I wanted, but it's kind of enough if I didn't have any makeup shots. Because then we're going to get into the bride actually getting into her dress. Yeah.
I think we have a couple questions in our studio audience.
Yeah.
Ray, can you tell us the frame rate that you're using and why you chose that frame rate?
I'm shooting at 23.98, which is basically 24 frames, which is the frame rate of film. And you know, we're always kind of looking to achieve the film look. So that's why I shoot with that look. You know, the 30, and it's really something that you have to get your eyes adjusted to, because there was a time where my eyes couldn't even distinguish between 30p and 24p. So I think it's something that you got to kind of train your eyes to recognize. I don't think brides would ever, for the most part, be able to distinguish between 24p and 30p. I think that's just something that's within us. You know, we want this ultimate film look, and I think they definitely appreciate it because they're seeing it, but they're not really understanding how that look is being achieved. This look of film. But they're certainly not going to call you up and say, "Hey, were you shooting at 30 frames and not 24?" Things like that. You know, their eyes definitely aren't trained to see it, and my eyes weren't trained to see it for a long time. But then, now, if I see 30p, I just, you know, I definitely don't want to shoot in that mode. You know, because it's more of like a video-ish type of look. You know, where we're always kind of trying to achieve this look of film. That's been kind of the goal for a long, long time. Yeah.
You were saying that you don't have a lot of conversation with the bride about what she should be doing, but in your pre-meetings, you say anything about don't look in the camera or any basic other things that brides shouldn't do while you're filming her?
I don't do it in the pre-meetings. Sometimes I'll do it on the shoot itself. Like if I find them, you know, looking at the camera, I'll just tell them, you know, you don't have to look at the camera. Just pretend we're not here. I'll just tell them that. I think that's kind of like a common phrase that we tell brides, just pretend that we're not here, because we're always looking for natural emotions. So that's the only thing that we do in regards to that. And sometimes they do look at the camera. And I tell you, the fact that we shoot with these DSLRs, a lot of people think that we're shooting photos. So they'll look at the camera and they'll pose and they'll give you, you know, they'll give you smiles for the camera. So you're going to run into that if you're shooting DSLR, especially like at receptions or ceremonies. You're pointing this camera around. People actually think you're a still photographer. Which in a way is a good thing, because Usually with video, they kind of like, they hide from the camera, but for the photographer, they kind of like, they open up and they pose. So a lot of times it can be good because you get people to open up and show their actual natural motions and things like that. And they don't shy away from the camera as much. So I definitely think it's very advantageous to shoot with this camera. So we're back. We shot the dress and the shoes, and we're checking out the bride. She's looking great. And here I can just always check focus. I check focus for every shot. And remember, it's okay to film hands and not the face all the time, because if every clip that you have is just bright face, bright face, bright face, bright face, with the same composition, it's like a jump cut. It's visually disruptive to the film. So if you go from like hands to face to maybe a wide shot to maybe the makeup artist to maybe the makeup artist dabbing the makeup, the film flows a lot better, and it's not so disruptive. If you have the same compositions back to back in a film, it's literally just like a jump cut, and it's very disruptive and distracting. So she's looking good, and like I said, just kind of look around, see if you can find anything interesting to shoot.
A question came up from J.D. Delian, who wanted to know about reflectors. I know you told us earlier, Ray, that you like to shoot mostly natural light, maybe not in dark reception halls, but do you ever use reflectors for video?
No.
Never?
No.
Okay.
And we'll just wait here. A lot of times you're just anticipating shots. But this is pretty interesting. And then, like I said, you can always introduce some movement. And don't spend too much time there. Don't fall in love with your shots. Just get your shot and move. If you get a good position. And these are very fast. Just even if I have her hand there, I'll try to get her hand in focus, and then I can come back to the bride. There you go. And then I can even come to the makeup artist. And then I can do a little subtle movement here. Perfect. And sometimes when you're moving, if you keep the same distance between one object as the other, you can kind of just transition from one to the next without having to manipulate the focus. The focus on here is very challenging because if you're not checking focus, to do it on the fly, it just gets kind of tricky. And sometimes you just got to get lucky that it lands tack sharp. But sometimes you just practice a couple times until you nail the mark. And let's see what we got. So I'll probably change up lenses. I'll get a few shots with a 50, and then I'll generally just put the 100 on there and try to get some wrap-up shots. And remember, you're always looking for other things as well. You're looking for natural dialogue that might be happening around the room. So if you hear some beautiful words being spoken, kind of gravitate to that position. Okay, cool. And we're looking good. And I'm really just scouting. This environment's literally all new to me. So here we'll just see what we have. And here, here you can obviously, you can do some rack focuses back and forth. Just really anything that's interesting. Let's see. There we can. There's a different one here. This is pretty cool in here, so we'll just wait. We'll wait for the makeup artist to come on.
Henry, as far as makeup being,
And there I can actually see the makeup artist, and I can transition from there to the actual bride. So sometimes you don't know what you're going to shoot, but it's just kind of in the frame.
so is there any application of makeup that you would not include? Like you don't want to see someone putting in eyebrows, you're mostly looking for mascara or eyeshadow or lips. Is there anything that you absolutely will not, any sort of makeup application that you don't
Yeah,
want?
definitely. You definitely have to use common sense when doing these shots, because like I tell you, if the bride doesn't like the way she looks in the film, she's just not going to like the film. So there's certain times where they may be applying something and you're seeing like the top of their eyeball or the bottom of their eyeball, just something that's not flattering for the bride. I would definitely maybe not shoot that or not include it definitely in the film. So if they're applying eyelashes, generally I don't use any of those shots because they're sort of like manipulating the eyeballs, or she's looking straight up, things like that. I just won't include that. So just use common sense. You know, obviously if the bride is wiping her nose or, you know, doing something that's unflattering, we're not looking for those types of shots. So it's really just shots where the bride's looking her best. That's what we're looking for. And sometimes you're going to be here and you're literally just waiting, because maybe you have all the shots that you need and you just have to wait till they kind of finish up. So at this point, once I have enough shots, I'll really start to try to get into figuring out, you know, are there going to be speeches? Is there any vows writing? Is there a dress, shoes, rings? I'll just go off and I'll start shooting that, because you want to kind of give the bride their space too. You know, like once you have enough shots, kind of lay off a little bit. You know, you don't want to be so much of a presence where, you know, maybe the bride just gets annoyed, you know, having you there all up close and personal. And you know, there really is an art to being so close and intimate with the bride and having her still react naturally. You know, that just goes to show that you have the ability to really mesh with the bride and make her feel comfortable, even though you have this, you know, big old camera and you're right there up close and personal with her and you're trying to get all these shots, and she's still able just to relax and be herself, you know. So I think that's an art, is being able to be in the bride's zone without her really feeling like you're even in her space, you know, that type of thing. So you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to just, you know, you don't want to push it so far that, yeah, now you're really going to start to become annoying or anything like that. So, you know, get in her zone, get what you need, and then just, you know, casually get out. Because there's still going to be photography, so the photographer's going to be in there, you're going to be in there, back and forth. So it could get a little bit overwhelming for her, you know, especially it's her wedding day, she's stressed out, she has a million things on her mind, and that's it.
Question in the studio audience?
Yeah.
Ray, in the morning when in case bride is reading a card or something, when some audio is important, do you use any lav mics or anything, or just on camera mic?
No, just use on camera mic. I have I generally don't shoot with a microphone on the camera, but as soon as I start hearing that there's some natural audio that I want to record, I will go ahead and throw on an on-camera mic. Yes.
I noticed it looks like you're using just your standard photography lenses. Have you tried any of the CineStyle? Because you're at a razor thin kind of depth of field, I didn't know if you find that having the extra focus between that 0 and infinite was any help, or if it's a hindrance, or how it works for your workflow.
No, I literally just run and gun with this camera, and I try to just practice my focus points. But other than that, I don't have any other type of assistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the groom's prep, since your second shooter shoots it mostly, I shoot the groom's prep mostly. And
Perfect.
is it the same lenses that Jessica uses or different?
Yeah, different lenses. Like she's using I know she uses a Carl Zeiss 50 lens, and I'm using a Canon 50 lens. And then on her end, I think she has a Canon 135 2.0 that she uses, and I use a Carl Zeiss 100 macro. I don't have another Zeiss lens, so she can't have that. You know, so she's stuck with a 135 lens, so she kind of makes do. The groom preps is really, the groom preps is really so minimal, right? It's so minimal. I could shoot a groom prep in 10 minutes max. I'll finish a groom prep. Whereas with the bride, it's literally like an hour, hour and a half process because you just have so many things going on with the bride. And it really is all about the bride. Not so much about the groom. He's a character and he's there, but it really is all about the bride. So it definitely takes, it's a lot more involved with the bride, whereas the groom, and you know, the groom's kind of like, they just want to be grooms. They want to be cool. They want to go hang out with the friends. They want to drink. And you don't want to kind of, you don't want to invade that too much. You don't want to get the groom out of a good mood. Things like that. Because most grooms are just kind of going with the flow. You know, like, tell me what time to be there, I'll show up. You know, that type of attitude. Whereas with the bride, this is her dream. You know, like most women have dreamt about having this gorgeous wedding, whereas most guys, you know, have cringed. Things like that. So for the groom, it's just like, you know, yeah, I'll show up. You know, just tell me where to show up. Whereas the bride is a lot more important for the bride. And that's why it's a lot more involved, you know, as far as the makeup and the dress and looking beautiful and everything's perfect. But that stuff takes time to document. So that's why it definitely takes a lot longer. Now, I like the fact that Diana shoots the groom preps because, you know, Jessica, she shoots the groom preps. And I'm at such an advantage because if you have a female shooting groom preps, for the most part, if you're a guy and you're going to a groom prep and none of those guys know you, they're not so receptive. You know, the response that you get is generally like, who's this guy? And he's invading our space. And we can't act normal, the way that we normally act, goofing around amongst each other. Because now we got this guy who's like a stranger, kind of like in our zone. But guys, for the most part, they love to show off in front of women. So when the girl shows up, they have no problem inviting girls, you know, or a woman into their space. So what do you get? You just get their natural side, which is, I think, is a huge advantage. I get so much great footage from Jessica because they really open up and they want to show off and they want to be funny and they want to do all this stuff. And really, for the film, that stuff just comes across really, really great, you know, because it just shows that they're having a really good time and they were comfortable, they were relaxed, they didn't have to go out of their zone, things like that. So it's really an advantage that Alex has here. As you probably know, she probably gets some really good footage. Now, sometimes Jessica gets, you know, too good of footage. You know, sometimes you're almost too relaxed and comfortable having her, you know, in the room. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to take a shower now. You want to come on in and document this? You know, so sometimes they're almost too relaxed. But it is a great situation just because they really open up. They don't feel like their zone's being invaded. So if you have a situation where, you know, you can have a female shooter, maybe do your groom preps, that'd be great. Yeah.
And Ray, I wanted to ask you another technical question before we get started again, because I know
I turned it off.
You had talked about, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We covered frames. We've covered frames per second. A lot of people in the chat room are talking about having your shutter speed always set to 1/50th.
150?
Yeah, 150.
Oh, 1/50th, of course. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about 1/50th versus 1/60th, or what your shutter speed?
Yeah. So in a perfect world, with these cameras, you'd want to shoot at a 50th of a second, or with some cameras at a 48th, because you want to double whatever your frame rate is with your shutter speed, you know, to really achieve like the look of film. But that's like in a perfect world. But unfortunately, we're not functioning in a perfect world. Now, I have a camera at home, which is the Canon C300, which has built-in ND filters. So I can typically stay at the native ISO and at a 48th of a shutter the whole day. It doesn't matter how bright the lights are. But with these cameras, you don't have the luxury of having the built-in ND filters. So you're really forced, unless you just want overexposed shots at a 48th of a shutter, you're really forced to use high shutters. We have a bride that's gotten in her dress. Now, very, very important before the bride gets into the dress is that she understands exactly what to be doing once she gets out here. Okay. So generally, before the bride goes back to get dressed, I will tell her, I said, listen, just go to the next room, or I'll step out and you stay here. That's actually the best situation because you can actually leave them in the good light. Just let them get dressed here. And sometimes I can sneak a couple shots, not of the bride in the nude, but sometimes just the slipping on the dress without showing, obviously anything that's not wanted in the film. It's kind of dramatic. It's very nice if you can get those types of shots. Her reaching up to grab the dress and pull it down, those are also great shots. So always kind of be on your toes. Obviously, I'll leave for the stuff that she's not comfortable having a camera inside there with, but definitely give her instructions. So if she were to leave the room, I would tell her, I said, listen, get dressed just up until the point where you're comfortable with us coming into the room, us meaning video and photo. And she'll say, okay, because I still want to get the laces in the back. The zipper's very fast. I definitely prefer laces because it takes so long and you can get so many shots if they do have like a button up or a lace up. But sometimes they just have a zipper, and if it's just a zipper, then the getting dressed segment is it's very fast, and you don't have time to kind of bounce around and get different shots. So I'll instruct her also, don't put on any jewelry, because once she's in her dress, if you didn't have a lot of time to get the getting ready stuff, because maybe she had a zipper, at least if she's putting on her earrings, I think it looks very flattering for a girl, very nice. If she's putting on the earring and nice dramatic lighting with her beautiful wedding dress on, same thing with a necklace. You could have somebody else, maybe her mom or her sister or somebody close, put the earring,